vede più niente. Vedere? Dietro. C'è il computer di vado a prendere il ok, video.
Però io volevo dire, faccio in modo che no, ma quello non mi interessa.
Ok. Sul modo per tirarla giù.
Sì, capito.
Una bella idea. Poco. E qui la puoi muovere poco, Quindi fissa. Sì, magari muovi la poco, così. Un attimo un po' più su. Sì, quando la causa così. Sì, no.
L'unica cosa che posso fare magari
Prova
devo tenerla ferma.
per girarla non puoi. Ci devi tenere prima per vedere. Muovi le mie. Ciao. Da qua. C'è qua. Tu che mi dici?
Il mio cuore mio stava battendo.
come dici? Come va?
Io vedo da una semplificazione. Sta contando tutto, vero?
Sì, attendo un feedback di Lorenzo. Lorenzo? Io provo a fare un feedback sull'audio.
Ah, ti dicevo, adesso me lo so, tipo così faccio...
Vabbè,
quando
sì.
parla con loro.
Sì. Più che altro ti serve parlare al microfono.
Ok.
Ti serve parlare al microfono per sentire qualche cosa. Vai lì.
E si c'è qua, si prova, sì.
Sa. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1. Prova audio streaming. Prova audio streaming. No, poi dopo deve avere un feedback se effettivamente
Si sente dove dice la Milano e ci sente da hangout.
perfetto.
Quindi abbassiamo qua e poi lo rialzi.
Vabbè.
Davide, ricordi solo il record quando inizi?
Cosa?
Ricordi solo il record.
Certo, assolutamente. Magari quando arrivano allarga un po' che si veda che arrivano, si siedono. Così va bene. Così indietro, così avanti.
E così indietro e così avanti, perché io c'ho anche dei problemi a girare indietro.
Avanti.
Così indietro e così avanti. Si vede che sono boccia, non è che in piedi, tutto lo stesso.
Ah, questo comodo. Devi fare con la gavetta. Ok, grazie. Adesso devo provare. Poi diciamo che aperto ma basta. Ciao.
Ok, lasciatela solo così. Adesso io vi passo subito. Mi è stato dato questo ruolo di breve di Pippo Baudo, un minuto, per introdurre oggi questo evento legato allo Share Festival che si teneva a Casa Jasmina, che è un progetto che nasce dal lavoro che abbiamo fatto noi con Arduino, sono in parte insieme a Toolbox l'ospite di questa cosa, e abbiamo dei giudici d'eccezione per questo premio. Io non voglio parlare troppo, vorrei lasciare la parola a Chiara Garibaldi, che invece lei del premio sa tutto, per cui ti lascio la parola per spiegare ai nostri giudici.
Grazie mille Massimo, io ho l'onore e il piacere di presentare questo nuovo network di lavoro, che per me è la cosa più interessante. Stiamo creando la nuova edizione di Share Festival insieme, come ha detto Massimo, non diciamo nulla perché c'è chi vi racconta le cose, e soprattutto aspettiamo poi a maggio lo festival alla Minifer, e quella la cosa più piacere, e scusate se lo come questo sta bene, mi auguriamo prima di un prossimo futuro a venire. E poi ci tenevo a presentare il direttore artistico, il nuovo direttore artistico di Share Festival, che è lo scrittore Bruce Sterling. Bruce, come with me, please. Bruce, welcome.
Okay, I understand we're having a panel here. This would be good. I am Bruce Sterling, and speaking English for the sake of the people on the network. And I am the artistic director of Share. This is a very important day for us. This is our jury meeting, in which we selected 6 works to appear here in Toolbox. In the end of May for the 10 days of Share Festival, followed by Mini Maker Fair. So we had to go through 20 works of art to have the finalists, and then we had quite a long argument about who the winner is, and we have the winner. So we have 5 jury members. That would be Chiara Garibaldi, who's the Share Festival director, and Jasmina Dushanovic, who is the Jasmina of Casa Jasmina, and then 2 guest curators who have come a very long way to join us. Paola Antonelli here, who is the design curator of the Museum of Modern Art in New York, who flew over to lend us our moral support. So perhaps you could join us. And our second guest judge came here all the way from orbit. A woman who has lived in the International Space Station, Mankind's House Among the Stars, for our house guests edition of Share Festival, Captain Samantha Cristoforetti. So at Share Festival, their input was extremely influential. I would even say they dominated our discussions. And we're very grateful for their wisdom, a woman who is internationally known for her interest in design, architecture, art, museum display, culture industry, and an engineer and a pilot, and the woman who has spent more time in orbit than any other female human being. So we're just, yeah, right. So they are very tired after this hard work, and they have been through a lot. So I'm thinking perhaps you would just like to get a few things off your chest, right? How did that go for you? What do you make of that? Oh,
Sure. Well, it was fun. As Bruce says, I'm an engineer and a pilot, and I'm an astronaut, and I know absolutely nothing about art and design, but I guess they needed somebody in the jury who kind of plays the role of the absolute ignorant general person. I don't know. But it was a lot of fun, and this is of course a very special type of art. It's very much, I thought, a lot of the work is a little bit at the intersection between art and technology and engineering, which I find fascinating, and so definitely a fun experience. Plus, I got to know this wonderful place, so Casa Jasmina and the Officina Arduino and Fab Lab here, which is an absolutely fabulous world of people who think and make and are creative, and that's definitely something that I'd love to see, and hopefully maybe even in the space business we can leverage a little bit of the talent and creativity of this environment. Okay, perfect. I completely agree with Samantha. What I would like to add is that, now it works, is that it was quite amazing to see the range of the projects that we looked at. They ranged from very pragmatic and still quite fanciful to instead completely speculative and critical. And so it's quite amazing to see after 11 years of share price, right? Yeah, it's 11 years. The evolution of the price and how diverse it's been since the beginning and how it continues to be, which is a testament to the fact that this kind of environment, the maker environment, is really embracing all forms of expression. I think it's the most generous stance that one can take towards art and design. Art and design, especially art, like to put everybody in their place, and instead this culture is really embracing and comprehensive. So it's been a fun day, a great experience, and fighting and arguing has been wonderful.
That was good, actually. You two are both being in our little house of the future there, Right. Okay, fine. So after having been in Casa Jasmina, since you are experts on the subject of living in unusual conditions, I wonder if you have any advice for us as to where we ought to take that space. Because, it's a little unusual. It's kind of a party clubhouse and also kind of a test lab and also sort of a place to live. Is there anything you think we ought to do to it? Something missing? Some critical insight? I mean, you spent the entire day criticizing works of art. How about criticizing the house for us?
We were talking about it last night. I think there should be a hammam, and actually we've already found a place for it. So a hammam, first and foremost. Every house needs a hammam. No, seriously speaking, I think it's quite great, and the fact that it's a place where you can add things and test things is going to make it even more fanciful in the future. I have to actually channel Bruce and ask for more lamps. I think he wants lighting fixtures. He's not happy with the current production of lighting fixtures from the artists and designers in residence. But otherwise, it's really quite a great place. And I think that you should, especially the children's room, could become even more experimental.
You want to talk about experiencing the bedroom there? I know it was very loud.
I mean, what I'd say, thinking about a house, in the space business, in European space agency, in the space community, in Europe and around the world right now, we're thinking a little bit about what's coming next. We have this amazing place, which is the International Space Station, which is this huge laboratory and really humanity's home in space. And it's gigantic. I mean, it's as big as a football field, and lots of space to the point that
we had the luxury sometimes of wasting space, not completely optimizing. It's been an evolution over a long time. And so now that we are thinking about going back to the moon, one day going to Mars, probably the first thing that we're going to have after the space station, I'm talking early next decade, so we really need to start getting down to business now. Is the habitat in lunar space. I mean, not on the moon surface yet, that's going to come afterwards, but habitat in orbit in lunar space. And it's not going to be another space station as big. I mean, one thing is to build something in Earth orbit, one thing is to build something a lot further away from the moon. So it's going to be a lot less real estate. And so I think we have to become really, really smart. Our housing spaces can have to be even smarter and optimized. So if you want to turn a little bit of Casa Jasmina into an experimenting phase where you can try out solutions and make it really, really, really good use of a very small volume, like maybe having solutions where something, same volume can serve different purposes depending on time of the day it is or what is going on. Smart architecture, smart design, and smart technology will be very great for this future space travelers.
That's good advice. So, both Samantha and Paola are very well known on social media. Paola is at Curious Octopus at Twitter. And I advise you to follow her Twitter account because I certainly get a lot of benefit out of it. And Samantha is Astro Samantha, who has really hundreds of thousands of followers on Twitter. And Paola also is very good at doing public outreach events, and you've been in Torino for a couple of days going and dealing with the consequences of your celebrity. So I wonder if you have any advice for us. I mean, suppose that here in Torino in the Fab Lab, we had like a really good idea, and we wanted the outside world to know about it. What should we do with social media to kind of get people's attention, or do you have any advice along that line? I mean, what should we be doing that we're not doing?
Get William Gibson to retweet you. No, seriously, you already have the tribe. No, you already have an amazing tribe. I mean, your tribe is the one that's on Twitter. So I think that you should find the one, if you want to really reach the main channels like CNNs, etc., then you have to find the one account that they follow to get all their ideas, because we know that that's where they get them, and have it retweeted there. But I think that it's very easy for this community to go viral within itself. You need to find the channel out, which is always the biggest challenge.
How about you, Samantha?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm obviously in a very easy business from this point of view because, everybody likes space and everybody likes astronauts when they're in space. And believe me, before I flew to space, nobody cared about my Twitter account. So there's very little I can say except build a Casa Jasmina in space. No, but and of course, it depends kind of public you're trying to reach, and I think the Italian public is overall still quite a bit traditional media. So in Italy, you almost have to be on TV to exist still today, which is a bit unfortunate, I think. Internationally, of course, you can have a better reach with social media only, maybe. Yeah, I mean, I think cool projects, cool initiatives where you try to involve people, cool visuals, any kind of really nice video that you can make that shows off or really shows what you're doing. A regular presence, I mean, having people want to come back for more, like some kind of regularity, I think is interesting. I like to follow people or accounts where I know that, on a regular basis there's something new, and so it's always interesting to see what else they've come up with. Giving a human face to things, I think that's really important. I mean, we all relate to human beings. So sometimes those of us who are involved in technology tend to really only look at the technology. And there's a little portion of humans who are really drawn to technology in itself, and I'm definitely one of those. But then the great majority of human beings, I think, are drawn to other human beings. And so have a human interaction be the medium through which you, get people to get to know what you're doing from a technological research point of view. I mean, give a face to Casa Jasmina, which can be Jasmina.
So you now have your very large social media following, and you're not in space. Do you have any idea what you're going to do with your social celebrity in days to come? I mean, yes, you were not famous a while ago, but now you are. What are you going to do with your fandom?
Yeah, I don't know. I never perceived social media as, or celebrity by that means, or by that matter, as a goal. I mean, to me, it was just a tool to share something very special that I was a part of. Again, a lot of people have started to follow my social media presence once I went to space, but I started a lot earlier. I mean, I started writing logbooks and really taking a lot of time every day to write about what was going on in training, and I started at launch day minus 500. That's about a year and a half. So a year and a half before launch, I started to write almost every day a blog about what I was doing in training. And the reason is that I wanted to share the story, not just the pictures, but really the story of what was happening. And I even continue that in space, although it's really hard to find the time up there. For the good part of the mission, I actually, I know most people really maybe saw the pictures, but I was actually writing and describing experiments and things like that, and that probably is less known. So for me, it was about being one of the few human beings right now on the planet who can experience something extremely special, which is training to go to space and then go into space, and share that story as much as possible. Now, that is finished. I obviously don't do anything as exclusive and as special now, so I'm obviously not that active on social media anymore. I try to share things that I'm interested in, and sometimes things that I do, but it's not like I consider it my mission now that I can, I need to get more social media followers, or I need to tweet every day. I mean, that's really, either I have something to say and I will say it, or I don't, and then I won't say it.
Okay, well, if you'd like to be locked into Casa Jasmina for a few months with no way out, we would be happy to feed you through a launch ship, and you can tweet as much as you like. No, I was actually very impressed by how on top of your blogger game you were up there. Okay, so you also saw our Fab Lab, and Paola, you see a lot of design gizmos and sort of approaches and techniques and so forth when you're running your events in New York. I wonder if there are any gizmos or tools or devices that you think we ought to have. Something we ought to have on the ground besides the usual 3D printers, our 6-axis robot, the big router. It's like, what do the cool people have that we failed to attain? Yeah, but yes. Is there anything that strikes your mind?
Well, I'm gonna say platitude. Well, you miss a delta. We were talking about that printer that is really cool, but I'm gonna say something that will sound really like a platitude, but I mean it. I've seen a lot of maker spaces, and what makes the difference is not only the tools, because you don't need anything super sophisticated to have a great space, but it's really the people that are there and how they make you feel. I've just been to probably one of the top labs with like the most amazing tools that everybody would be salivating after. And it was great, but I have to say that the atmosphere was almost warmer and more conducive to good ideas in this particular lab, also because you can get it dirty. I've seen so many maker spaces that are too clean, and then you just feel that you can get it. Today I was watching, there are some amazing cobwebs that are right at the top. They're beautiful. And I was thinking we should clean that because of course I become part immediately of the makerspace. And then I thought, no, we shouldn't. That really kind of looks good. So it's the people around you and what they do and what they share with you that really help. And also you have this really cool robot right now, so you have everything it takes.
We're glad to see that. Okay, well, you're an engineer, Samantha, and very familiar with avionics hardware and the hardware of the aerospace industry. Do you think any gadgets, tools we have that I know one we really want. We really want a 3D printed zero gravity space coffee cup. Because these are around and they are printable and they're sort of, they would look great on the coffee shelf, but I'm thinking more on the lines of productive machinery, like, gadgets and tools.
Yeah, I'm not the expert. It would be totally absurd for me to comment on that because, obviously you have people here who run a makerspace. So, I'm totally not the expert here. But I'm fascinated by the drawing. There's a guy there who's drawing us. Hello, who are you?
He's just some street artist.
Who are you?
We don't know this man.
Okay. So you're gonna live draw our talk here, is that right, Fabrizio? Okay. Wow.
This is typical in the design world.
Oh, okay. See, I'm totally the outsider here. That's cool. That's cool. I look a lot better than in real life. Thank you.
Well, we probably need more whiteboards. We need more graphic recorders in the Fab Lab. That would be okay. Yeah, he needs a permanent employment there. Okay, you don't know any tools or hardware, but we're actually quite interested in talking to people in high-tech avionics. We don't know very many of them because we're from the digital world and kind of design and so forth. Do you have any advice on how we could make nice to people from the aerospace industries? Because they're all over Torino, but we don't really hang out with them much. How could we get them to show up for one of our gigs? Any ideas there?
Have you tried asking them?
We don't know who to ask.
Oh, you don't know who to ask? Oh, I can fix that. No, I think they'll be thrilled to work with you. It's funny, I was telling Massimo earlier today at the European Astronaut Center where I work. We are actually a very small European Space Agency center. We're only about 100 people. And we do not do any technology development. We have a big, ESA, the European Space Agency, has a big engineering and technology development center in Noordwijk in Holland. There's thousands of people working there. And we're a very small center in Cologne, about 100 people, and really almost 100% devoted to the space station and to running ops in the space station, to training astronauts, medical support for astronauts, family support for the astronauts' families when they're on orbit. It's all very centered about what's going on now. But we have a very small team that I'm sort of helping to coordinate now. It's part of one of my hats right now. Very low budget, very much based on little money and a lot of creativity because, officially, again, we're really devoted to the space station. But there is this little budget and a lot of students that we get from all over Europe who are kind of like tinkerers. It's kind of like a little, almost like a makerspace in the sense that there's a lot of trying out different ideas at a very low technological readiness level. If we wanted, we found that some of those ideas are really worthwhile developing, and we would have to turn them over to our technology development center, and then they would get a real budget and increase what we call the technology readiness level. And we work with, in close cooperation with a network of, universities and companies around Europe, because there's a lot of interest on many people's sides to actually work from early on with the end users. It's a mistake that was done in the past quite often was that, they would develop something and the astronauts or the end users wouldn't see it until it was fully developed. And then it was like, wait a minute, that ain't gonna work. Or, that could have been done differently or better. And so now we're really trying to get the end users, who are the crew members, the astronauts, involved early on. And so 3D printing is actually a huge thing right now. I mean, we had a 3D printer on the space station when I was up there last year. There was the first one. It was a polymeric printer, so basic plastic. And the idea was really to validate it. I mean, does it work in space? It's not so obvious because you don't have gravity, right? So does the extrusion work properly? Are the properties of the material or the item are going to be the same? And so it was kind of an initial try. The next step is going to be to, change material, go into metallic. Because really, if you think about it, again, we're thinking beyond space station. So, again, space station, We've done that. We understand how it works. Very robust logistics change. We can bring stuff up. We can bring replacement parts. We can bring tools. We can bring everything. It's pretty close. We think Moon or Mars, very different stories. You know, very limited app mass capability, very limited volume on whatever vehicle we're going to have. So it will make sense and will be necessary to be able to 3D print items and specific tools that you might need. It will be necessary to be able to recycle the material. And so, you know, definitely 3D printing is going to be a must for that. But also, equally interesting is that we are going to have to, you know, for thinking missions to the moon surface and having a habitat for astronauts on the moon surface, for example, it's going to be huge to be able to use the material which is on site. And what's on site, you know, technically that's called in situ resource utilization, you know, big word in space exploration. What can we do with what's already on the moon or with what's already on Mars? Otherwise, it's just way too much mass that we have to bring there. And so what's on the moon? Not a whole lot, but we found ice on the moon. And then there's basically this powder which is on the surface of the moon that I'm sure you've seen in Apollo landing footage, which is called regolith. And so one big, or a couple of big projects in Europe right now are, you know, how can we sinter regolith on site on the moon? And you know, it sounds like a, you know, maker's project, but. Yeah, I'm not the expert on the topic. You need a lunar geologist, but it's a mix of, you know, fragmented rock, silicas, and yeah, no, definitely. I mean, and yeah, and then the other question is, where do you get the energy? I mean, you know, there's two approaches. I mean, you can use the solar power, so you know, concentrated solar light, like a solar oven type of thing. And you know, there's actually a project going on now that should try to demonstrate that capability. And the other possibility, you know, if you don't have sunlight available or you don't think that's effective, you know, one of our guys at ESA actually tried to microwave sinter regolith. If you looked in literature, it didn't seem possible. Literature said it wasn't possible, but he decided to give it a try. And actually it turns out that maybe it is possible. So, you know, there's a lot of that tinkering approach. And, you know, that's not, again, I mean, there's also fully funded projects in terms of space explorations where we are really going at much higher technology readiness levels. But I'm just saying that, you know, also in the space business, sometimes it's about trying things out and tinker with things and brainstorm ideas. I call it also practical brainstorming, not only think about ideas, but also practically trying out and see what happens.
So,
About the Marcus Kaiser project. There's actually a project by Marcus Kaiser. He's a designer. It's called solar sintering. He took this contraption in the desert. So he checked out different deserts to find the right sand. And so he 3D prints with sand of the desert using the sun. And it's quite beautiful. You've seen that? It's solar sintering, yeah, exactly. So it's a similar approach.
So Paola, last time we met in New York City, you were having an event, and it wasn't exactly in the museum, it was sort of in the neighborhood. And, you know, I've never really seen an event like that. But, you know, obviously you were trying to, like, acquaint people in your circle with things that you thought were kind of important trends in design. And it was not exactly a public event, but not exactly a private one either. And it was sort of like a seminar and sort of like a briefing and sort of like a pecha kucha. And I wonder if you could explain to us what you were, I mean, how you figured out, yeah, what were you doing? I mean, what's the, like, victory condition in a thing like that? Because I envied it very much. I would be happy, you know, to see events of that kind happening in Torino, but I wonder if you could give us some organizational hints on how to do such an interesting thing.
So nice. Thank you so much. Actually, it's one of these salons, you know, it's, at MoMA, I'm also running a department of R&D. For the whole museum. It's a lot of R and very little D, because I have no money, and it's half of me and one research assistant that changes every 12 months. So what we do is, today I had some magazine interviews, and I got a really good question about, several actually, what's the role of the museum? And I really do believe that museums are not positioned the way they should be right now, because their role
is to make better citizens, to improve people's critical abilities so that people can face issues in society that might not have a direct connection with art, but in which art could be helpful and museums could be helpful. And it's an idea that came to me during the financial crisis of 2008, because people keep believing that the financial sector is really so fundamental to the destinies of a society, and instead the cultural sector is superfluous because we don't have the right metrics. And in 2008, it finally was clear to everyone that the financial sector cannot be trusted. And I saw an opportunity for the cultural sector to show that it can provide a slower kind of progress, like slow food, but more dependable and just, more holistic and more humanistic. So I proposed this department to the director of MoMA, and at that time we were all taking pay cuts not to fire anybody, so we couldn't start a new department. We waited a few years. But one of the biggest tasks of this department is to have these kind of monthly events on issues that are important to society and in which the museum has something to say. So we had an event about taboos, we had an event about philanthropy, one about culture and metrics, algorithm, fluidity. I think that the one you were at was the object connected, so we had 3 that dealt with the change in the idea of object that has been brought about by the digital era. And the way these events work, very often ideas seem so ingenious, they're dictated from necessity. So this event is semi-public because if it were really public, I would have to ask the education department's permission, and instead by making it private, I don't have to ask anybody's permission if I have the money. But it is organized this way. Every time we have 4 speakers, and these 4 speakers come from very different backgrounds, possibly. They speak for 7 minutes each. I make an introduction at the beginning that takes a long time to prepare because it's almost like a state of the situation. So when I talk about the object connected, I go back into the idea of connection and the idea of object. And then the trick is that the audience is all invited. There are like about 120 people that show up. And when they RSVP, when they answer yes to the invitation, they get a reading list. It's very funny. When you ask people to do homework and to prepare for an event that is free, they come much more enthusiastic, more prepared, ready to talk. It's really, really good. The questions are excellent. There's more engagement. And this session lasts about 2 hours. And then afterwards, there's drinks and food for another 2 hours. And people don't leave. It's very funny. That's what I've noticed. New Yorkers are fantastic. They're very enthusiastic. If there's a hurricane, they're still there. They love to go to events. But in this particular case, I discovered that how people try to eliminate friction? We have to insert more friction in what we do, because if you ask people to engage, they're going to have more fun.
So you think the difficulty of it is part of it, inserting the friction. So yes, I'm carefully taking notes. So do you think it's important to have it every month? No. No, okay. Do you think the choice of theme is really important? Yes. Okay. Do you think the 7-minute 4 speakers thing is really vital to it? It works for you, but obviously not everybody is going to have Paola Antonelli to put together an introduction on the state of the situation. I'm thinking that's kind of the secret sauce. I don't think it's actually too much about the food, the drink, or the monthly. I'm thinking it's actually your personal charisma that causes people to fill the room. But I would be willing to try the experiment without you.
Bruce was a surprise guest that time. It was fantastic. So I had the 4 speakers, and I was there, and then Bruce, poof, appeared, and the audience went bananas.
Well, I was speaker number 5, and I had a lot to say about the subject because it was an Internet of Things, issue which we're quite keen on in Casa Jasmina. But I feel that that's kind of a missing thing in our Fab Lab, and in fact, it's more or less what's going on in this room right now. We have an event that's sort of private and sort of public, and it was kind of difficult to get to. And instead of, there were 4 speakers, including Massimo. And yeah, and there was some friction to it. And obviously it's important to Turinese society. And we have a theme, which is our art festival. And we're just going on a lot more than 7 minutes. And we also have Paola Antonelli and a little-known astronaut. But, you know, I would like to see that happen in Fab Lab. And I think, you know, we have a lot of issues, in fact, and a lot to discuss, and we seem to have more meeting spaces than we did. So if we were to have a meeting, I will ask the audience, because you look very attentive and polite and Torinese. If we were to have a meeting every month on some important Fab Lab issue where we had 4 speakers and some kind of celebrity guest, how many people would show up? Raise your hand if you think you would come. Yeah, about half of you. That's a pretty good start. You know, maybe we should give that a try. Do you have any advice on sort of doing briefings for people? Captain Cristoforetti, because I know you have to do a lot of kind of number crunching and training to get things happening in a hurry. Do you have any hints on getting people up to speed on difficult technical issues?
Well, I'm usually on the other side. I'm the one who gets trained, but my experience is that it's, I mean, it kind of depends, you know, what numbers you're talking about. You know, do you need to train 1 person, 5 people, 20 people? I mean, if you have small numbers, it's really, I mean, I think the good instructor or the good teacher is the one that can really adapt to the learning style of the person. There's nothing worse than being on the receiving end of instruction and realizing that you're actually annoyed because that's just not the way you want to learn. But that the teacher or that instructor is rigidly sticking to their plan, or they're not reacting to the feedback you're giving, right? You know, you might want to go over something real quick because you kind of already know it, and devote more time to other things that really trigger your interest. And so, if you have that opportunity because you're not instructing many people, then it's really important to be simultaneously talking and instructing, but being receptive to feedback so that you can adapt. I mean, it's kind of a basic thing of teaching, I guess. And that, of course, only works if you're talking about few people, because then the law of great numbers says that, you know, if you have a lot of people, then you're going to have a lot of learning styles and what people expect. So, yeah, there's not much more I can say about that, unfortunately.
Well, in our Share Festival theme, it's house guests, and it's about electronic art for home, domestic spaces, personal use, and so forth. So I want to ask both of you a question about clothes. And I want, about clothing, yeah. And Paola, I want you to tell your anecdote about this 3D printed clothing you've been seeing, because that seems very exciting. But Samantha, I have been asked by somebody in the audience to try to figure out where you get your blue ESA jumpsuits. Is the blue, yeah, because, you know, these kind of things you were wearing in orbit. In fact, toward the end of your assignment, you started popping up in sci-fi costumes, which is impressing a lot of people. And now I've noticed that people on the space station dare to dress even in gorilla suits, which is like a completely different thing for the astronaut corps. But people were admiring your clothing, actually, on the space station because they saw you kitted out in your ESA and you know, the zero gravity pants that have like the Velcro strips on the legs, which are the only form of zero gravity clothing that's like never used on Earth. You never really see anybody with strips of that kind. And I noticed that you're wearing your ESA blouse here, and you're like actually kitted out like an astronaut on planet Earth. I wonder if you could just talk something about that. Like, where did the clothes come from? Where did they go after they're used? How could we get some? Which are like, which kind of space clothing would you recommend for people on Earth? Yeah, I mean, just level with us here.
Well, I mean, first of all, you know, I'm really sorry to disappoint everybody, but the blue jumpsuit is really only used for PR. Americans actually use it to fly because they get to fly the T-38, which is a combat jet, or I mean, it's a training combat jet. But in Europe, we don't do that. We don't fly jets as astronauts. And so we really only use the jumpsuit typically when we want to show that we are a crew. So when you're assigned to the space station and you want to show up as a crew, then you all wear your jumpsuit and then you all have your mission patches so that everybody sees you belong to the same crew and the same mission. So it's a little bit of an identity type of thing. And then we use it for talks and so that people actually know that you're an astronaut, which is great because you have your blue jumpsuit and everybody assaults you because they want autographs and pictures, and then you take it off and you just walk out and nobody knows who you are anymore. It's wonderful. But in terms of what we use in space, it's really not that fancy. I mean, the big thing on the space station is that we don't want anything which is going to catch fire. So typically no synthetic materials, which would be great to have because they're they're usually lighter and they don't smell as easy and all that kind of stuff. They dry faster. But the truth is mainly we have cotton because we want to make sure that if there is a fire or an emergency on board, we don't catch fire. So the big rule is, 100% cotton. And they make an exception for sweaters. You can get up to 20% synthetic on sweaters that you want to bring if you want to bring some of your own. And then the pants, those cargo pants, they're like tactical pants. They're off the shelf. You can buy them. You can go in a shop and buy them. And the only thing that we change is, that we add all that Velcro so that we can stick stuff on the pants. But other than that, they're really off the shelf. And they're not cotton, but they're a material that is fire retardant, so they're not going to catch fire. And we don't get a lot of clothing. I mean, we get about one of those cargo pants per month. And then we get shirts. I think we get 2 workout shirts per 2 weeks. They come in bricks of 2 weeks, the little boxes of 2 weeks of clothing supplies. And so there's like 2 shirts to work out for sports and one for just daily use and underwear. I think you get, I think you change your underwear every 2 days or something like that. It's not the greatest thing because right now we have no way of washing clothes. So you kind of wear them until their expiration time, and then you get out new ones and you trash the old ones. So again, another thing that we really have to figure out how to do differently for long duration deep space missions is probably how to wash clothes somehow, maybe without water, and maybe we can eliminate the bacterial charge and everything that makes them smell and stuff in a way that doesn't necessarily involve water. So there's also something that we probably need to work on, and it'll be interesting. But the space station is what we call a short sleeve environment. So there's air just like we breathe here. Quite a lot more CO2 than we have on the Earth, unfortunately. We can't quite, our life support system can't quite bring down the CO2 level to what we're used to on the ground, which, it's almost zero. We have very little CO2 in the air on the ground. I mean, more than is good for our environment, but for us human beings, we are usually not affected by the CO2 level. In space it's different. I mean, it very often it gets up to the point where you can get affected by it. You can get headaches, or you can feel fatigued and stuff like that. And so if that happens, they try to bring it back down, but that involves using our resources a little more than we want to. So in the end, we kind of have to deal with having a little bit of an increased CO2, which is not great. And maybe, again, something that we could improve in the next iterations of space environments and space vehicles. Of course, if you want to get out of the space station, that's a whole different story. Then we have that big, bulky, white space suit that allows you to... It's like a little spaceship, really. You build this little spaceship around your body, and it provides you with everything that you need to survive as a human being, with oxygen and a pressurized little vessel around your body. Much lower pressure, not 1 atmosphere, but about 1/3, and provides you with communication. It provides you with cooling, so you have a little. It's not like Sandra Bullock in Gravity. That's like crazy. She comes out of this suit after having done things that are totally unimaginable, and then she just comes out in her underwear, and she doesn't have a single bruise. I mean, we come out of that suit and we're bruised everywhere. and we have a garment, a protective garment, a very thick protective garment, and still we have bruises everywhere, and she just comes out in her underwear and not a single bruise, so that's not realistic. So we have this undergarment that has hundreds of feet of little tiny tubules, little tubes, and so cooling water is circulated so that it keeps you cool. Otherwise, you would overheat from your, working inside the suit. And that's for spacewalks. And then we have a sort of a pressure suit that we use for ascent and descent. So in the Soyuz or the space shuttle had the equivalent. It was an orange suit that they used to wear on the space shuttle. And those are really only meant to save your life in case you have a depressurization, in case you lose the atmosphere. And so you basically have vacuum inside of your vehicle. That suit is connected to an oxygen supply, to oxygen tanks. And so, you basically would close the helmet, put on the gloves, so making sure that there is a seal. And then you have a constant supply of fresh oxygen into the suit, and you have a valve that lets the extra oxygen out, but keeps a certain overpressure inside. So that suit would probably, if you had a depress, it would probably keep you alive for at least a couple of hours. It wouldn't be comfortable. It would become very warm, very hot inside, because you don't get such a high flow of oxygen, so it would get really, really hot. But it would keep you alive and not overheat you for a couple of hours, and that should be enough for you to make an emergency descent and come back to the ground. So that's the reason we had that.
There must be a fandom who's like picking up this military surplus astronaut gear. It sounds really exciting. I mean, when you say that you trash these clothes, where do they actually go? Are they burned up on re-entry, or are they basically sold somewhere in Star City by underground Soviet collectors? I mean, well, I'm very curious. I'd be keen to know. There's an unwritten science fiction story there. So, Paola, wearables, high-tech fabric, design things, clothing. What are you seeing?
It's funny because there seem to be much more space-like items on the fashion runways than in space. And with all the experimental fabrics that are happening with nanoparticles to, keep them clean, it's funny that you go back to cotton. It says a lot, but it makes sense. What Bruce was talking about is something that was shown about 1 week ago, 10 days ago in New York at the fashion shows. And there's a lot of experimentation in 3D printing for fashion. In particular, it's Stratasys also Autodesk, but Stratasys has been known to do some of the most interesting experimental work with the best fashion designers. And last week, 3S4 is a New York-based company, put on the runway 2 dresses that were done 3D printing elastomers, so it was soft and quite intricate. So the 3D printing really followed the shapes of the body. There were overlaps. There were strange vents. It was, really a little bit like Avatar, but it was black instead of blue. But, I was about to say wearable, like you can wear them. Yeah, you need to look pretty cool and quite perfect, but, you can wear them. They're not completely odd. And I like that this experimentation is going on. These were soft in the past. There have been really interesting 3D printed dresses, but they were a little bit rigid. So I like the fact that many 3D printing companies are actually going in that direction, because it's exciting to think that in the future we might be able to print our clothes on demand, and maybe just like we would do on the moon, reuse the material when we're tired of our clothes. We just grind them or put them in some contraption that gives us back the source material to 3D print the next ones. I like that idea because, waste is not pleasant anymore. It's not acceptable anymore. It's something that bothers us. And so 3D printing in fashion gives the chance to not only have renewable wearables, but also not to waste the material. When it comes to wearable technology, it's really interesting because we've been having lots of discussion about wearable technology. In a way, there hasn't been much advance since the 1980s. The same thing as virtual reality. There seemed to be a lot of advance, but we still have technology that we have to wear. I think that any good designer would like technology to completely disappear, would like to have a watch without the watch, So that's the ultimate goal. That's the one that Bruce is wearing is the first cool iWatch. No, it's not an iWatch, but I know. No, it's cool because it looks like Hermes, but not really plasticky red Hermes. I don't know. Usually it doesn't look like a guy's toy, because all wearable watches look like they're made for guys. That's a little more interesting. But wearable technology is still a nuisance as far as I'm concerned. And I think that there's more and more a tendency to try and make it disappear and instead focus technology on the pleasant side of wearing.
Right, well, I hope the agents of the Pebble Corporation were listening to the design director of the Museum of Modern Art praising the design of their watch. Well, this is like the Casa Jasmina wearable here, you know. In theory, well, you know, we kind of hacked it. You could shake that if you like. It's got a little spider that runs across the front. It's kind of fun. Okay, well, you know, this is the Well, everybody has to hack the watch. Let's come on. It's not an open source watch, but it is a Kickstarter project. I mean, it's just started by a small group of guys who've managed to have something of a project hit there. This is the Halloween watch face for a spider running across if you image with the accelerometer. So this is the part of the part of the it's nice. Yeah, spider. especially yeah, he's plenty scary. So so this is the part of the event where the audience asks questions, and you know, as moderator, I hate that. I don't want any of you to ask any questions. So I'm wondering if our participants, you know, you're a particularly curious person, Paola. Your inquiring mind is something everybody notices about you. I wonder if you have a question. I mean, you've sort of been through the area, you've seen a lot of stuff here, but not all of it. Is there like something missing that you don't understand that you're curious about?
I would like to ask you, when one thinks about Turin, the cliches about Turin, there are many, but good cliches, pastry and chocolate. Has anybody started collaborations with other industries and specialized areas in Turin from this Fab Lab? I think that would be a great outreach project. Not the stupid chocolate, you know, 3D printed chocolate, something like really hefty. Has anybody started? So which other sectors in Turin does this community interact with?
Just numbering your sectors would be a good start. Everybody should go home and just name your sectors. If we have another meeting of this kind, we're going to get together and compare everybody's sectors. How about you, Samantha? If you had a question for the audience, you know, what would that be?
How are you guys doing? Not falling asleep? No? Okay, that was my question.
That was great. You can see why the public loves this woman, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, I think that... Sette caldi, yeah. Are you cold out there? Yeah. Can I get you a sweater? A flame-proof cotton sweater? Yeah, that would be good. Okay, we've been working really hard today, ladies and gentlemen, so we're a little bit punch drunk, but we're going to go back up to Casa Jasmina here and like try and get our heads together and maybe have a bottle of wine and compare notes. So, yes, after a long but successful day of Share Festival activity, we have our 6 winners. We have our Share Prize winner as well. Will you please thank me in helping our fellow and thanking our fellow jury members for really their wonderful moral support for us and their wisdom. Thank you very much.